you plan to bring it up?
HR.
Oh, sorry. HR 40?
Oh, you're talking about that. And what's your question?
No, I was just curious, why hasn't the House yet brought up that bill? And do you plan to bring it up later this year?
I think they're having hearings. It's a bill just to have a study, and it's up to the committees to have their hearing on that. I think people welcome that conversation. Congresswoman Jackson Lee has been a champion on that.
Just to follow up on your comment, because I know you were referencing the incident with Congressman Cawthorn.
Okay, I'm not talking about that anymore, okay? I'm not making any comments. Look, you have a concern about the behavior of the Republican conference. I have a concern that they are not here for meeting the kitchen table needs of the American people. My concern about their ethics and their behavior is something the American people and their constituents have to make a judgment about. But if you want to know what keeps me up about them, is that they are just opposed to all of the initiatives that we have to expand Medicaid so many more poor children especially can have access to it, that they oppose initiatives about pensions to ensure that families of these children have security into their grandparents and the rest, so they can have kitchen table concerns about the cost of food. My concern is that they're in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry and are in denial about the climate crisis. My concern is that they're in the pocket of the gun industry, and so they will not vote for initiatives that prevent gun violence in our communities. My concern is that it's very hard to get something to lower the cost of prescription drugs. You want to hear something about that? We had a bill that would contain the cost of insulin, $35 cap on cost of deductible on cost of insulin. The industry was charging 10 times that. We're talking about $30 to $35. They're talking about $300 to $600. Do you know how many Republicans voted to reduce the cost of insulin, which affects many families in our country? 12 Republicans. So that what matters to me is what matters to the American people. We have a responsibility to have an ethical standard here. They have to take care of their own house. If not, there will be ethics complaints. But
well, there
I'm
has
not
been in the
spending
case of Congressman Cawthorn, Madam Speaker. That's what I was going to ask you about.
We're fighting for America's working families. We're fighting for the kitchen table concerns. We're not here to talk about books that were written and what would you say the word is? Just total inconsistencies about who was responsible for January 6th. The President of the United States incited an insurrection against the Constitution, against the Congress, against this Capitol. They had their mixed reviews about it, and now they have to deal with their inconsistencies about it. But the fact is, many of them, as the leader has indicated, could be a danger, as he said, and that's why we are protecting the members of Congress.
Democrats are siding with Republicans and calling for a vote on Title 42, while both caucuses are largely united on arming Ukraine. So why not split the votes?
Well, we haven't made any decision about how we go forward, but let me just say about Title 42, President Biden did the right thing to substitute something that is more effective at the border, to protect our border, and to respect our responsibility to welcome refugees or asylum seekers to our country. That we need a better plan than the Trump administration had in effect. I always like to quote two people. One is the person who represented the evangelical community, the Association of Evangelicals, when he said, the United States program of refugee resettlement is the crown jewel of American humanitarianism. That's what we have to get back to, a place like that. 42 is not in furtherance of that. But we have to have something else if the president's taking that away and his administration is putting forth a better way to go. The other one that I like to quote, and you've heard me time and time again, is Ronald Reagan. read his last speech to the country. This is the last speech I will make as President of the United States, and I want to communicate a message to the country I love. And he talked about immigration in such a beautiful way. I don't want to do it, I won't do it justice in quoting the great communicator, Ronald Reagan, but you should Google it.
On the Ukraine bill here, and obviously there's talk about maybe putting the COVID money in. You say there hasn't been a decision made about.
Well, I'm all for that. I think it's very important. We have emergencies here. We need to have the COVID money, and we need, time is of the essence because we need the Ukraine money, we need the COVID money. So I would hope that we can do that. This is called legislation, and legislating, and we'll have to come to terms on how we do that.
But if they have to drop the price tag, the president reiterated the call for $22.5 billion.
Yeah.
Yet there was a deal between Senator Romney and Senator Schumer, a lower figure. Do you see that figure coming back up to 22.5? Or
Well, I would hope it would come up to 22.5, but as you described, this is a Senate negotiation, and we'll see what they come up with because it'll be what can pass the Senate, and it would be paid for.
And is Title 42, if it's put into that, or there's a vote on that?
Well, that's a different story. Let's see what the Senate, my understanding is that the Senate is working on, I don't know this for sure, but my understanding is that the Senate is working on other language that serves the purpose at the border, but is not a Title 42.
Madam Speaker, an issue that's a lot of American people are dealing with is the economy, and we just got the latest numbers showing that it did dip slightly. Is this going to have any effect on the 2022 election come November, the midterm? Well,
I think this is an aberration. There are plenty other statistics and analysis that have said this is an aberration, and there are many other factors that show that we have growth in our near future. But what we're worried about is what it means to the kitchen table, again, not to the election, but to the kitchen table of the America's working families. This is a president that has, under his leadership, 8 million jobs. 8 million jobs in 1 year. Again, a large part of that comes from the private sector. We respect that. Public, private, nonprofit, private initiative, individual initiative, but public policy on the part of Democrats in the Congress, as well as the President of the United States, 8 million jobs, cutting unemployment in half, raising wages. And again, when that happens, inflation goes up. When you have unemployment going down, as we said, when you have supply chain issues, costs go up because supply goes down. So we have to deal with it. But I do think that if you read some of the other analysis that has surrounded that, and we want to, this is deadly objective. These are numbers. We think that one of the reasons for that is that our exports are out of balance. There's so much more being imported than exported. And one of the reasons to how we go down a path to improve that situation is to pass the Competes Act, bring it all home, and have our balance of trade be much more favorable to our country. That is another aspect of that figure, 1.5% or something was it this morning, and I saw that. But I also constantly read about this, and including this morning, as to those who have said, don't read so much into that. That's for then, but we will do better. We will have growth. And again, this Competes hopefully will be overwhelmingly bipartisan. It certainly was bipartisan in the committees where it was written in the House and in the Senate, although the Republicans didn't want to give us a vote on it on the floor. We got one Republican vote, but nonetheless, strong support in the committees where the legislation was coming out of science, space, and technology and the rest. I think a disagreement about whether we need chips, perhaps in one of the committees, but I think everybody knows that we need chips. So we have to, we can't ignore any of it. We can't ignore inflation. We have to pay attention to it. We watch those numbers and see what feeds into it. Is it the trade issue or what? Supply chain, how do we address that? Chips is an answer to a number of those. Thank you all very much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, grab part of grab my thing, but that's okay. Because he walked off.
Yeah, I'm good.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, I knew it was there somewhere.
Thank you, Eddie.
Oh, no problem.
I just kind of.